So Fjords, we have basically 3 leather grades that we offer. But what they all have in common is that they are all top grain cowhide. And then we have 3 grades. We call it a Nordic line, soft line, and Astor line. And often within our world, we just call it NL, SL, and AL. 3 different grades or price groups. Okay. Now, basically all our leathers are top grain. Top grain leather. What is top grain leather? The top grain really is when you split the leather into layers. It's the top layer. Okay. So anyhow, so when the hides come into the tannery, they're very, very thick. So they're about this thick, okay? And they have hair on the top and they have like fat on the bottom. They're about this thick. The hair on the top of the hide is removed during this process, and the fat on the bottom is also removed. So the leather hide basically goes from about this thick or so to probably about this or so, or maybe, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch. At this point, they're cut into layers because again the leather is probably 1/2 an inch or so thick, and it's too thick to be used for upholstery, so they cut it into layers. And that's where the whole concept of split leather or top grain leather comes into play. The top layer is top grain, okay? That's all that really means. It's the top layer, okay? Everything underneath, there could be 2 or 3 layers, it's per definition split. It's still leather, but it's not as good for upholstery on sofas, recliners, and so on and so forth, because it doesn't have the pores, the original pores where the hair was attached from the cow, and the pores, allow the flexibility, pliability, and it's nice and soft. And you lose that when you go deeper into leather, into the splits, okay? That's what it is. Now, at that point, basically, they take these hides and they split them into different leather grades, okay? Or another way to put it is that you could call it price categories, if you will, because certain hides are expensive, some are inexpensive. So let's talk about really bit what makes a leather expensive, what makes it inexpensive. So a lot of people say that if it's expensive leather, it must be super high quality, and if it's inexpensive, it must be poor quality. It's not necessarily so. It's really what you pay for expensive leathers. You pay for fewer natural imperfection. Now, natural imperfection is basically what we call typically, stretch marks from the cow, barbed wire cuts, insect bites, and things like that. So again, so back to a little bit, what determines the price of a leather, or what's the grade of a leather. Again, most imperfection is the lowest priced, least imperfection is the highest. Now, so those hides that come in that have a lot of natural imperfection, they are often what we call corrected. They get corrected because it's not aesthetically pleasing. And what that really means is that they take a big hide and they buff it out. What that means is there will be a dull spot where that has been corrected. Of course, if you have a big hide, you can imagine if you have a spot like this where it's been corrected, and you have the natural grain looking pattern like this, it's not particularly pleasing. So what they do is they use actually embossment plate to sort of re-imprint a natural grain pattern right into the leather itself, so it looks nice. So you correct it, you emboss it, okay, and that's how it looks uniform across, all right? So that's really how you sort of deal with the natural imperfection. So, but that means basically is that those least expensive leather hides are heavily corrected and they're heavily embossed, all right? And those that are expensive, so in our world, the Astor line leather grade is not corrected because it has so few natural imperfections in the first place, whereas the NL, which is our starting price, would have a lot of imperfections that is corrected. And then the one in the middle we call soft line, that is spot corrected and spot embossed. So sorted into 3 different categories, one being the most expensive, one being the least, one being the least imperfection, one being the most imperfection, and therefore corrected, okay? So after the correction process is done, it gets aniline dyed, okay? So all our leathers are top grain and aniline dyed. And what does that mean? It means that it has been aniline dyed. It basically goes into a big drum with dye, typically vegetable dye, and they're dried through and through. What happens really is this, and this is a cheap benefit of the aniline dye process, is that once it comes out of the drum, it is blue both on the front and the back of the leather. So, and people say, well, big deal, why does that matter? Well, it matters because of this. occasional with use, you can have a scratch or a cut. I mean, someone sit down in a leather sofa with let's say, a screwdriver in their back pocket or whatever it may be, and they actually have a cut into the leather. Well, if it's an aniline dyed leather, then inside that cut is approximately the same color as the top of the leather. And that's the chief benefit to you as a consumer, that you get a product that even if you have a little oops at home, it's not a huge detriment because it doesn't stand out like a sore thumb, okay? So that's why we use aniline dyeing process, okay? After that, we also do two more things. The next step in the process, they take it after the aniline dye process, and they actually apply what we call surface pigmentation. Surface pigmentation, a way to think of it, is like a color that's sort of applied to the surface only. And the last step in the process with all our hides is actually there is a teeny little coating of polyurethane lacquer on top. What does that mean? Well, it's a clear lacquer. It doesn't change the color at all. However, what it does do for you is it allows you a little bit more time to have an accident to spill something. Let's say red wine on a color like this. Eventually it will soak through into the pores. It's hard to get out. But that top polyurethane lacquer allows you a little bit extra time to go wipe it up and clean it up before it soaks into the leather. And that's why we put it on. Another thing I just want to bring up, and that's a little bit less to do with the leather assortment we have, but a little bit more about how we do things. A lot of manufacturers today, in order to offer a product at a lesser cost, is they actually take the back here and the arms and the seat, and they actually put the top grain leather on it. But then where they take actually a split leather here on the outside back, outside arm, they put split leather on it because split leather is obviously less expensive. So split leather, remember I told you about, it's cut in layers, and it's the layers down from the top, and it's a less expensive product. I mean, split is still leather, okay? And it's great for soles for shoes, belts, and whatnot, but it's just not great to sit on them. Some manufacturers even use a leather match, they call it. Leather match is a funny word, but that for the most part means vinyl, okay? So they put vinyl here and leather here. Again, you might ask, hey, who cares? I don't sit on it, I don't wear on the outside, and all that is true. Any material that's exposed to sunlight or UV rays fades at a different pace or speed exposed to UV rays, okay? So this very, very nice chair had this been either split or been vinyl, this chair, this lovely chair, it's, I think we call this stone, will be a two-tone chair when exposed to another UV rays. And that's because it fades at a different level. And again, I'm not trying to knock manufacturers that use that technique, but if you're trying to justify that this is maybe, let's say, $200 more than what they quote, I saw down the street from another manufacturer, I want you to say, well, it's all well and good, sir, ma'am, but just remember that 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, sitting in your sunroom, you might regret that. So isn't that worth another $100 or $200? And that's really what you get by always having top grain leather all around. And so now we have many different product categories. So I want you to know that this applies to all product categories. We simply don't offer leather, a match. We don't offer vinyl. We don't offer split anywhere on anything. So as a company principle, we just don't do that. So it doesn't matter what you order from us, it'll always be top grain on the front, on the back, everywhere. We have an extensive warranty that covers a lot of our products, but I just want to talk about, since we're talking leather right now, we actually have a 2-year warranty on cover, okay, and that really covers manufacturer's defects. So 2 years, most other manufacturers have a year or less, so that's a really, really good part of our warranty. You just need to remind people of that. And what does that mean? It basically means that if there ever any issue with the color sort of coming off of leather, or there's a stitching problem that might come undone, it's covered on the warranty the first 2 years. That's a really, really powerful warranty, and exceeds most other manufacturers, even luxury brands, by at least 1 year. So keep that in mind with leather.